Yo, what's up everyone? My name is Yura, and from the dark to the light to back to the dark, we are here today with Dark World. I am re-recording this deck profile the day this video is supposed to go up because I was going through the Dark World list that I was going to put on the channel, and it didn't feel me. I don't really know how else to put it. I was trying to pilot it, and it just didn't feel right. Like, nothing about it was clicking with my brain, and I wanted to try something different. Initially, I wanted this to be a showcase of Ceruli, Guru of Dark World, and the weird gimmicks that this card allows you to do by summoning itself to your opponent's field and discarding your Dark World monsters to get their additional bonus effects that they get when they are discarded via an opponent's card effect. That was not coming together, unfortunately. I could not make it work. There might still be a world in which that version of the deck does exist and is good. I probably am not going to be the person to build it, at least right now, because for some reason, one way or another, I cannot wrap my head around these cards. It's weird to talk about it like this because I feel like Dark World is mostly a deck that not necessarily builds itself, but it's not like a difficult deck to build. There's a handful of cards in here that are just like guaranteed includes like 3 Grapha, 3 Snow, 3 Brow, some amount of Beige, 3 Dark World Dealings, 3 Field Spell, and some amount of the Virus cards. And the rest is just like, you play staples. I'm realizing actually right now that we're not on any MST, which feels wrong. I'm just realizing that right this second, so I now have to figure out what gets cut to fit that in. We're going to do that as we go through this, because Lord knows I'm not playing this deck with no MST in it. No thank you. God, this is a mess. So Dark World is a weird deck. It is pretty much like undeniably one of the top 5 decks in the format. It is very strong. Grapha is a phenomenal card. The tools that it gets access to are really unbelievably strong, but like, it's a little weird. It's a bit strange. It doesn't have any like inherent starters, I guess. Everything it does is based off of discard effects, so that means you have to find a discarder and a discard E to get something going. Snow is your best find early because it is your searcher, but in order to search, you need to actually find a discard card. So like Dark World Dealings, Drag Down to the Grave, Card Destruction, Gates of Dark World if you have Graveyard Setup, or Trance Archfiend. We have ways of enabling this, but not necessarily clean ways of like making sure we find it. I don't really know how else to put it. It's just a weird deck to build. I'm looking over this list. Sorry, my brain is distracted. I'm trying to figure out what gets cut for the MSTs. Honestly, I might nuke Silva into the sun because this guy is realistically just a 2300 guy that summons himself when he gets discarded, which is like, fine, it's okay, but like, I don't really know if I need that. So we'll cut one of you and we'll cut, I don't know, something else. We'll just play like, I don't know. We'll play 42. I don't really care. That's fine. That's fine, right? This is fine. Nobody's gonna complain. All right, we're chill. All right. Anyway, Dark World. So this is one of those decks that I feel pretty comfortable going the card by card route with. This is a lot of really self-explanatory cards. They are relatively simple, except for the fact that some of the wordings on these cards is just unbelievably awful. Like, Snow is one of the most difficult cards to parse if you're just trying to like read it and comprehend it while it's the first time you see it. Not ideal. We're gonna get there though. We're gonna start things off with Grapha, Dragon Lord of Dark World. This is the star of the show for so many reasons. It's got a phenomenal attack set. It gets a 3k under Gates of Dark World, and it has some very, very powerful effects. Its first effect reads, you can special summon this card from your graveyard by returning a Dark World monster you control to the hand, except itself. Grapha's summon does not start a chain. This just kind of happens. And what I mean by that is, this is not an effect that activates in the graveyard. It just happens. He just summons himself to the field, and then when he is summoned, your opponent can respond to that summon like normal. But this is not like, I will trigger this card in the graveyard, bounce my guy to hand, and then summon it. This is, I will bounce my guy to the hand and then summon it, and now you may respond. This card is phenomenal. Like, the summoning condition on it is genuinely unbelievable. It's really, really good. Additionally, this card's discard effect reads, you could target a card your opponent controls and destroy that target, and if it was discarded from your hand to the graveyard by an opponent's card effect, you can look at a random card in your opponent's hand, and if it was a monster, special summon it to your side of the field. This is one of the main reasons I wanted to attempt to build around Ceruli. I think Ceruli is phenomenal. It is a really interesting card. Phenomenal in the sense that it makes my brain happy, not necessarily that it is a good card, but I love gimmicks. If it was not already obvious, I love gimmicks. I'm a sucker for gimmicks, and Ceruli is a gimmick, so I wanted to play it. Instead, we're not on it because, one, there just isn't a lot of space for it, and two, there's just generally better things you could be doing. Grapha, though, is unbelievable. This card is so good. Like, legitimately, this is the reason this deck is worth playing. If we just had, like, Silva and Gold, and that was it, this deck would not be doing anything. It being removal on a discard effect is unbelievable. It's very similar to, like, an Atlantean in that regard, but also it is a boss monster that is the threat in addition to the removal. It's very powerful. I'm actually gonna, real quick, I'm gonna, you know, just don't mind me. I'm just gonna replace one of these beiges with a Silva. It's okay. We're gonna just vibe this out as we go, all right? This is not, I'm running late as it is, all right? We're just gonna make do. Next up, we've got one Dark Armed Dragon. I'm not gonna lie, I'm actually weirdly not convinced by Dad in this deck. It's a good card for sure, and we can modulate the amount of darks we have in our graveyard fairly consistently through the Gates of Dark World and just Grapha getting himself out of graveyard. But the big problem is that it's not a fiend, weirdly enough. So that's kind of like a recurring theme that I've been having with this deck is whenever I test cards in it that are dark, so they're good here, they can make like some generic good dark stuff. You can play like Armageddonite to get Zephyros onto board, and Zephyros can bounce the field spell. That is cute and all, but they're not fiends and they're not Dark World cards, which is problematic when you are trying to consistently field Grapha. And not having Dark World names on your board is the main way you will lose these games because you do not have a way of looping your Grapha. That's actually one of the reasons why I'm currently opting to play, or at least test, Tour Guide from the Underworld over Summoner Monk, which was in the previous version of this deck, because while Summoner Monk can summon out your Trance Archfiends, which is solid, it comes at the cost of a discard. And while this deck does like discarding, it likes discarding its monsters instead of its spells. The spells in this deck are really important to keep in your hand because they are, alongside your Trance Archfiend, your main ways of actually proccing your Dark World effect, and that is going to be the way that you resource your way into this game and kill your opponent eventually. I'm not going to say that this is the better way to play the deck. I think there is absolutely a world in which I am completely and utterly, totally wrong, and this list is terrible, but it is something that I want to mess around with because I haven't really done it before, and I was not, like, my brain was just not meshing with the other list. So we're going to test this out, and if it turns out to just be terrible, we can go back to the other Dark World lists. I have a couple of other ones that I will show off at the end of this segment in case you wanted to play Dark World a different way, but this is what I'm going to stick with for right now just because I want to test it. Anyway, Dark Armed Dragon, the rest of it, if you're not familiar with this card, it can banish a dark monster from your graveyard and target a card on the field to destroy it, and it has to summon itself by having exactly 3 dark monsters in your graveyard. This summon occurs from your hand. We have a lot of ways of facilitating this, of course. We're on a deck full of dark monsters, and we can modulate our darks in grave through the use of Gates of Dark World, banishing our monsters from the graveyard to either like lessen, or we can discard darks to the graveyard with its effect to make this happen. There are ways of changing the amount of darks in your graveyard for dad reasons. The problem is if you draw this card late, there is not more ways of adjusting your graveyard past like Grapha getting itself out of there, or finding another way to banish the darks from your graveyard. We have a lot of ways of putting the darks in the graveyard, not a lot of great ways of getting them out, which makes a late game dad kind of weird, which is why I'm still kind of iffy on it. We're on one Silva, Warlord of Dark World. This monster technically has 2 effects, but as with many of the Dark World monsters in this deck, we are likely not going to be proccing their secondary effects that are activated when our opponent discards, unless we're playing into some very, very specific matchups like the mirror, or a fun thing that you can do is, and you'll see this in the replays, but I want to be able to show off the fact that you can target a Machina Fortress with Grapha and then force your opponent to discard one of your Dark World cards, which will proc their secondary effects. I really hope we get to show that off because it's a very, very funny interaction for that matchup specifically, and I think it's really cool. But Silva is a level 5, 2300 attack fiend that reads, if this card is discarded to the graveyard by a card effect, you can special summon this card. And if it was discarded to the graveyard by your opponent's card effect, your opponent places exactly 2 cards from their hand on the bottom of their deck in any order. This is the card that facilitates the hand loop variant of the deck, which plays around with the Ceruli. We're not doing that. We are not doing that. Silva in this version of the deck is quite literally just board presence. You could honestly, instead of playing Silva, you could play Gold instead, who has the exact same discard to summon itself effect. And also it can, if it is discarded by your opponent's card effect, target up to 2 cards your opponent controls and destroy those targets. So it's removal as opposed to hand rips, which I actually maybe prefer. So I'm going to do that real quick just because I think Silva's cringe and I don't like cringe. Don't look at the rest of this deck. We're going to get there. But I think Gold is cool. We're also on 3 copies of arguably the best Dark World name outside of Grapha in Snow. On Light of Dark World, Snow is a phenomenal monster. This is your main method of searching your Dark World cards. Specifically, and then I'm going to reword how this effect reads because it is nonsensical to read as like face value. So we're just going to go like this. If this card is discarded to the graveyard by card effect, you can add a Dark World card from your deck to your hand. Additionally, if this card was discarded from your hand to the graveyard by an opponent's card effect, you can target a monster in your opponent's graveyard, then special summon that target, if any, in defense position. The way this card actually reads is a nightmare, but all you have to really be aware of is if you discard this card by your own effect, you get a Dark World Search, and if your opponent discards it, you get both the Dark World Search and a special summon of a monster from their graveyard, which is pretty neat. Snow is phenomenal, though. This searches literally every single archetypal card in the deck. It's very, very good. We're on 1 Beige Vanguard of Dark World. Extremely simple effect. This is functionally gold, but a normal summonable monster. If this card is discarded to the graveyard by a card effect, special summon it from the graveyard. It is one of the only Dark World monsters that does not have an additional effect that procs if it is discarded by your opponent's card effect. But honestly, like, it's fine. It's a solid discard target. It makes you rank 4s. It's like just like a good card to be rapidly recycling with Grapha. Just looping this guy back into your hand repeatedly is totally fine. Because he does just summon himself to the field when he's used his discard fodder. We're on Double Trance Archfiend. This is your main normal summon discarder. It's actually the only one that we're currently playing. There are a couple of other monsters that you could be playing in this slot that do occupy a similar space. Things like Fabled Raven, if you wanted to go the Synchro route, is a pretty solid slot in for this spot. But Trance Archfiend specifically reads, once per turn, you can discard a fiend type monster, and if you do, this card gains 500 attack until the end of this turn. And when this card you control is destroyed and sent to your graveyard, you can target one of your banished dark monsters and add that to your hand. This is a phenomenal way of recycling the monsters that you will banish off of your Gates of Dark World, because that is how this card works. It is a great way of just like getting a guy back that was DD crowed in case your opponent does something like that. Trance Archfiend is a phenomenal card. It is a really solid discard outlet. It also, that 500 attack boost does make it a virus target, not for this one, but for the one in our side deck, which is not nothing. That is not nothing. That is very relevant, unfortunately. But Trance is fine. If you wanted to go the Summoner Monk route, you can summon this guy off of the Summoner Monk to get your discard and then make a rank 4. But I want to try out this variant where we're keeping our spell cards mostly in hand. We're also on to 3 copies of Brow Huntsman of Dark World. This card reads, if this card is discarded to the graveyard by a card effect, you can draw a card plus another card if this card was discarded from your hand to your graveyard by an opponent's card effect. This is Destiny Draw. If you use it with Dark World Dealings, this is Destiny Draw. Draw 2, discard 1 is functionally what this card reads. If you use it with Dark World Dealings, it's a solid card. It's mostly here as just like a way to replace itself when you do use a discard effect that you don't really have like an ideal other target for. And the draw power is very much appreciated in a deck like this that is trying to turbo through its deck to find its very broken trap cards. Additionally, this is our other main target for Tour Guide, and one of the main reasons why I wanted to try Tour Guide at all is because you can summon it off of the Tour Guide and then use that brow as a target for Grapha. You can, in theory, do the same thing with Summoner Monk, summoning out either Beige or Snow, but I wanted to try Tour Guide because Tour Guide lets us flex into the rank 3 monsters, which I think have a little bit more use cases here than they would otherwise, and I want to mess around with it. And then finally, we're on double Tour Guide for the aforementioned reasons. It summons a Fiend out of deck, it gets us access to our rank 3s, and is generally pretty solid. On to our spell lineup. We are leading with a card that I am not convinced is super important, despite how good this card is. Allure of Darkness lets us draw 2 cards and then banish a dark from your hand, or if you do not have any in your hand, send your entire hand to the graveyard. This card is in theory good. However, the banishment is not where you want your dark monsters. So even though you draw 2, I don't actually know if it's worth it, if I'm gonna be super honest. I could very well cut this right now and probably not miss it. So you know what? There it goes. If that's wrong, you can kill me in the comments, but we're flying by the seat of our pants here. We'll come back at the end of the video to see if I was missing anything when we go through these test games. But if I'm not missing anything, then I will simply say that I was right. I will not actually do that. I'm not that egocentric. I don't want to come off like that. I'm just having fun. The actual next card in our spell lineup, though, is Instant Fusion. Only at 2 copies here because while it is decent at getting us into our rank 4 toolbox, it is not part of our main engine, and it is mostly just like a supplemental card that helps us access like a Lavavo chain if we just normal summon out a Trance Archfiend and it's just kind of sitting there not doing anything, or if we just have like a Beige sitting around on board, or if our Tour Guide gets Veilered, this is a pretty solid target for that, where we can then go into an Xyz play to kind of stave off a little bit of damage or extend a little bit further. On to our spell discarders. We're going to cover these all at once. We've got 3 copies of Drag Down into the Grave. Do not activate this in the Dark World Mirror. You will absolutely come to regret that. Drag Down into the Grave allows you to reveal both players' hands and each chooses 1 card from their opponent's hand. Then you discard the chosen cards from both players' hands. Then both players draw a card. I wish this card said that your opponent discards your card so you could get the additional Dark World benefits off of it, but it is what it is. Do not activate this into the Dark World Mirror because you will discard their Dark World card and they will get the extra benefit off of it. So, not ideal. We're on 1 copy of Card Destruction because it's good in this deck. It replaces your hand and triggers all of your discard effects, which is pretty nice. It's limited 1, so we're only playing 1. Although I'm going to be honest, even if we had more than 1, I don't know if I would play more than 1. This card is kind of weird because while it does turbo you through your deck, it doesn't do anything else. If you draw this like past the time where you've already kind of spent your resources, it's not a great draw, which is actually why I'm not super convinced by it, but it's fine. Next up, we've got 3 Dark World Dealings. This is your main discard card of the format, and it is also searchable. Dark World Dealings is a normal spell card that allows each player to draw a card, and then each player discards a card. This is a great cycling tool. This is how you're going to Destiny draw with your brow, and it is a great way of proccing Snow to search out any card in your deck. The final Dark World card that we're on in the main is the Gates of Dark World. This is a field spell that reads, all fiend monsters gain 300 attack and defense. This is great for getting your fiends over the attack threshold for your virus traps, and additionally, once per turn, you can banish a fiend monster from your graveyard, discard a fiend monster, then draw a card. This is another phenomenal cycling tool. This is also Destiny draw for brow, which is really nice, but it's also a great way of getting your Graphas in graveyard while also replacing it, and it also fuels your banishment for your Trance Archfiends to get back when it leaves the field. Trance is actually one of the reasons why I'm considering running Torrential Tributes in here over the Bottomless Trap Holes, because this is a deck that can just get its field back because Grapha is just so ever present. If you have any Dark World monster in rotation, Grapha can always come back. So Torrential is a legitimate thought here. And then we've got the Meadowlands staples, of course, the Heavy, the Dark Hole, the Reborn, the Foolish Burial, the Warning, the Judgment, the triple MST that we added pretty late, and the double Bottomless Trap Hole. And wrapping the main deck up, we've got double copies of Eradicator Epidemic Virus. This could instead be Deck Devastation Virus in the main, but I think Eradicator hits more decks more frequently, although it is a little more difficult to activate. Eradicator reads, you contribute a dark monster with 2,500 or more attack and declare a type of card, spell, or trap. Look at your opponent's hand and all spell trap cards they control and all cards they draw into the third end of their turn. You can destroy all cards of that declared type. This is an unbelievably powerful disruption tool. It is so detrimental for so many decks. Like, calling spell into spellbook is functionally game winning just on its own. And even some other decks like Fire Fist, like, it's still pretty brutal because you can turn off all of their fire formations. This card is just generally really, really strong, and it is a card that I kind of wish didn't exist so that we could play Dark World in a way that didn't feel super criminal. But it is what it is. Onto the extra deck, we've got our double instant fusion targets. Both of them are the dark targets. We've got a Hieratic Sun Dragon Overlord of Heliopolis as our rank 8 because we can use it, I guess. A Utopia to help us run over some smaller extra deck monsters in the format. A Shockmaster because we can field 3 darks relatively cleanly. 1 Black Ship of Corn to help deal with the Maystroke, the 1 Maystroke because it is very good. 1 Lavalval Chain to help set up our graveyard. 1 Abyssal to hit graveyard decks. 1 Gaga Cowboy to kill Ophion because that card is brutal when you are just trying to loop your Graphas. 1 Evil Swarm Nightmare because we can in theory make it, and it is pretty decent going first. 1 Leviathan Dragon as our rank 3 way of getting over some decently large monsters. 1 Levier the Sea Dragon to extend out of our banishment alongside our Trance Archfiends. 1 Temp with a Percussion Djinn to specifically deal with Gaios and Ophion. This card can rip the last material off of those cards, so their floodgate effects are no longer active. It is a very important card for that specific reason. And then we're on 1 copy of Wind Up Zenmanes because it is an annoying card to out, and we can make it relatively cleanly. Onto the side deck, we're on 3 copies of Maxi, 3 copies of Effect Veiler, just 2 generally good hand traps, 3 copies of Lightning Vortex. I wish this card triggered the Dark World cards, but unfortunately it does not. Does trigger the Fableds though. That's pretty cool. 3 copies of Mind Crush. There's even an argument to have this card in the main because of the information that you gather off of Drag Down into the Grave, just giving you full hand knowledge. So you can go Drag Down, set Mind Crush, rip another card out of your opponent's hand that you don't want them to have. But currently it's in the side for now. Double deck Devi Virus because it hits some of the decks that Eradicator does not. And the 3rd Eradicator for things like Spellbook. With all that wrapped up, let's see Dark World in action. All right, we've got games lined up, and as I kind of hinted to in the profile, we are into Machina Gadget, and oh my god, we have it. We can do the thing. It's Fortress and Grappa. We can do the thing. I'm gonna be super for real, y'all. I might get a little, just a tad, just a little too locked in on doing the thing, but it'll be all right. All right, it'll be all right. We've got a pretty solid opening hand: Dark World Dealings, Mystical Space Typhoon, Grapha, Dark Hole, and an instant fusion that is, I'm not actually convinced we need it. I'm gonna be super for real. Like, it does help in niche scenarios, but I don't think we need the niche scenarios now. I think we need, like, better engine support, so Infu might get the cut in a little bit. We'll see. Into our opponent's Machina Gear Frame, Machina Fortress, Heavy Storm, Dark Hole, and an MST of their own. Just the Meadowlands staples just glued to our hands. It's truly a beautiful thing. All right, let's see how this plays out. Draw phase, they're going to find another Gear Frame. They're going to go the Gear Frame. Gear Frame is going to get them another Fortress. They're going to go Fortress, pitch the Gear Frame to summon out the Fortress and set this MST. We are going to draw into a Brow. We're going to go MST immediately in standby phase to hit their MST to clear the way for us to do some silly shit. We are going to set both the Dark Hole and the Instant Fusion and draw into an Eradicator. No, we don't need that. We really wanted another Dark World name, so we could have done the nonsense thing of pitching Grapha to get Machina Fortress to force us to discard something, but now that discard is just going to be the Eradicator if we do end up doing that. Spoiler alert, I do that, and I lose the Eradicator for my troubles. We're going to normal summon out this Brow and use it to get a Grapha on board. They're going to draw into, I think it was the red gadget that they then pitch. Note, that is going to come back to bite them in the butt. Folks, always be wary of keeping your resource engines online, even if it means you have to pitch one of the best cards in the format. Just putting that out there. We're going to walk into this Machina Gear Frame, hit for 900, and pass it over to our opponent. We've got no interaction on our board, but maybe it'll be all right. They're going to go with the Heavy and set this Mirror Force because they cannot summon out this Machina Fortress. We're going to find a Bottomless Trap Hole and walk into a Mirror Force, which I did play a little bit safer because I am trying to Keep this thing in mind of we want to have a Dark World name in rotation at all times. So if our graphic gets outed, we can just summon it back and just have it be this reoccurring asshole. And that is the main reason why I did not normal summon that brow for the extra damage, is to play around something like the Mirror Force there. So we're going to use the brow to summon out the Grapha again before setting this bottomless. They're going to draw into a bottomless of their own and go for the Dark Hole before setting their bottomless. And now our play of normal summoning this brow is no longer safe, because while the brow will survive, the Grapha that we summon off of it will immediately get hit by that bottomless. And you'll see that right here. So we're going to lose our Grapha. A pretty solid setup for our Trance Archfiend, though, which is pretty nice. They're going to draw into a Dead Liviner removal, giving us another opportunity to go for something here. We're going to go to the Trance Archfiend and pitch the brow, getting a draw and into a Solemn Warning. We're going to set that warning. Two really solid back row pieces from us here. And we are just going to watch them set a card and pass before we draw into a bottomless and then go for a Dark World Dealings. We're going to pitch that other bottomless that we don't really need as they pitch the Limiter removal, because they now have actual cards in their hand that they can do something. We are going to go for this Tour Guide. Tour Guide is going to summon out a brow, and we're going to make a Levier, because I forgot that this guy can only summon level 4 or lowers. We probably should have just made a Zen Mains instead. We are going to walk in with the 15 and the 18, though, putting our opponent down to 1800. And they've only got, well, they draw into a yellow gadget, which is actually pretty nice. But we are going to warning that, which is going to be met by the Judgment, guaranteeing that this does go through. And then they're going to go yellow gadget, get green gadget. And then the Machina Fortress is going to pitch that green gadget end itself to summon out the fortress before it is met by a bottomless. And Grinnell is the worst card of all time, because the monster destroyed on your field by a card effect has to be sent to your graveyard, not the banishment, so you can't even trigger it off of bottomless. We go next. So that was kind of a whole sequence of nonsense that just occurred there. It is what it is. These things happen. Our opponent's hand in this game looks significantly better than ours. Double Gadget, a Machina Fortress, a Pot of Avarice, and a Monster Reborn into our Drag Down by the Grave, Tour Guide, Heavy Storm, Dark Hole, and Beige. Just the Meadowlands staples. We got the entire trinity in our hands here. Our hand does not look great. This Beige is really not doing anything really all on its own, and we don't have a good way of getting in to the rest of our main engine. No Snow in sight, no Grapha in sight, no Gates in sight. Overall, it's looking pretty bleak. So it's our opponent's opportunity to go first. They're going to find a Tin Goldfish off the top. Tin Goldfish is going to summon out one of their gadgets. Gadget is going to get another gadget, because gadgets do the gadget thing. They're going to go Geargigan X. Geargigan is going to get them a Wise that'll protect their monsters and summon out this Machina Fortress before then passing to us to find a Lightning Vortex, which is going to be kind of weird. We're going to go this Dark Hole because we don't really want to go anything else first. They're going to go out this Wise. We're going to summon out this Tour Guide into a brow. We're going to make off of this a rank 3, and then we're going to try and bait out this Wise with the Drag Down into the Grave with our last card in hand. The reason we do this is because our opponent does not know whether or not this card in hand is a Grapha or whatever it might be. And if it is a Grapha or like a Snow, that could be extremely dangerous for their single protection here in Weisel. So they are actually going to chain the Weisel here to negate the Drag Down, just in case it is something detrimental, which does allow us to go into this Lightning Vortex, pitching this Beige to clear their board. We're going to get it for 15 here, which is not nothing, and we're going to pass it over to our opponent. They're going to find a Judgment off the top and go this Yellow Gadget. Yellow Gadget is going to get a green, and then they're going to rip this Monster Reborn, getting a Machina Fortress to the field before ripping this Pot of Avarice, shuffling all 5 machines in their graveyard back into the deck, and then drawing 2. They find a green and an Iron Call, which is not currently live, and they don't really want to run over our Zen Mains just yet, because otherwise we would just be able to out their board, and the Machina Fortress hand rip is kind of like actually detrimental for them here. We're going to draw for turn into a Lightning Vortex that is not currently doing anything. We're going to hit that Heavy Storm onto that lone back row, just so we can guarantee the Zen Main gets in without having to spend one of its materials, because we do not want to proc this Machina Fortress effect while we have this Lightning Vortex in hand, because that could be used to actually clear up something nice on a future turn. But unfortunately, our opponent is going to find another piece of the Gadget Engine. They have a million of them in their hand, so it's not super unlikely. They're going to go into a Black Ship of Corn, which is going to be able to out our Zen Mains before they can walk in for 25 with the Fortress. It's going to come back to us, and we are going to draw for turn a Reborn. This is really not a spot you want to be in, because this is currently lethal on board. But pitching this Reborn feels uber bad. It's just genuinely terrible. But we do have to do it because otherwise we are dead. Unfortunately, we might be dead anyway, because this Green gadget is going to go get another gadget, and then they can pitch to those gadgets for a Machina Fortress before sinking in for just under lethal. And they've still got 2 cards in hand into a deck that relies on 2-card combos to do anything. We draw into a Grapha and scoop it up because we cannot do anything from this position. All right, time for that all-important game 3, and this hand looks significantly better, and our opponent has no spell cards in sight. We've sided in the deck devies over the Eradicators here, and this is a damn good deck to use it into. The Machina monsters will dodge it, but literally everything else is just up for slaughter. So good luck to our opponent here. We're going first. We're going to draw for turn into a second Grapha. We're going to go Darkward Dealings. Darkward Dealings is going to draw us into a beige, which is the normal summon that we needed to get this Grapha online. They are going to draw into, I believe it was one of the gadgets, and then they're going to pitch the gadget. And then we're going to trigger the Grapha, not doing anything. We're going to normal summon out this beige, and then special summon out the Grapha before we set down the deck Devi. We're going to go the deck Devi in draw phase to hit both of their gadget and the tin goldfish, leaving them with just the Machina monsters and our field wide open. We're going to watch them summon out this Machina Fortress and then go the Gear Frame to try and get the second Fortress online, but unfortunately we have the Veiler to stop that. They are still going to be able to get in for a decent chunk of damage here. The Fortress and the Gear Frame get in for a solid chunk, bringing us below half, and the deck Devi ticks below 1. We're going to set down this Judgment and then go drag down into the grave, but after summoning down our beige to forcefully pitch our Grapha via this drag down effect, because it is the only monster left in our hand while we pitch their Fortress. We are going to draw into a Gates of Dark World and elect to pitch the Machina Gear Frame here. Elect to destroy the Machina Gear Frame here instead of targeting down this Fortress, because we do not want to lose our Gates of Dark World that we would lose if we targeted the Fortress with the Grapha effect. We're going to activate Gates of Dark World, bounce this beige to hand, and then go the Gates of Dark World to banish this Grapha from the graveyard, pitching our beige, allowing it to special summon itself back while we're placing it in the hand with a Solemn Warning. We're going to then go combat, walk over this Machina Fortress, and they have a very tough decision to make here of what do I want to out on their board. Realistically, the only incorrect answer here is the Grapha, which is why they don't go for it. Hitting the beige means that if they find another way into a Fortress, they can get rid of our Grapha pretty cleanly, and then we don't have a good way of putting it back on board. This back row could be literally anything. It could be like a Mind Crush or something that will just end them. This Gates of Dark World is a pretty solid hit too, because that's our main engine piece, but like realistically with just one interaction, there really is not a good answer to this board state. They're going to go draw for turn. They do find another Fortress, which is pretty nice, but no way to summon it. We are going to find that Mind Crush, and we know what's in their hand because of the deck Devi virus. So once it goes to their turn, if we had a card in our hand, we could just Mind Crush whatever the hell we wanted out of their hand and then call it a game from there. But instead, we're just going to walk to combat phase because they have nothing, and we're just going to kill them into the sun. That's Dark World, baby. So we're back with the deck, and there were a handful of monsters and cards that just never really showed up, which is strange considering there were like 3 ofs. We never saw Snow. I'm really shocked we never saw Snow. The instant fusions did not come up at all. I'm not sure if that means they're just not worth playing or we did not find a scenario in which they are worth playing, but realistically, I could see these being cut for 2 torrentials, and I don't think I would miss them all that much. And we could just replace the monsters in the extra deck with a couple of other general toolbox cards, and I think that would generally be fine. I mentioned in the deck profile that I did want to bring up some other variants of this deck. I think it is totally serviceable if you want to cut a Trance Archfiend and play the Summoner Monks in place of the Tour Guides from the Underworlds and just go on a more rank 4 package instead of the rank 3s. I think that's totally serviceable. You could also, with this package, use the Armageddon Knight and Zephyros package. Zephyros being a really interesting card in this deck because it can bounce your Gates of Dark World for a second activation, much like how it works in Dragoonity, being able to bounce Dragon Ravine and then activate it again. Because these cards are not hard once per turns, you do have to have another discard in your hand, but with Dark World, ideally you do. So there's a lot that can be done here with things like this. The other one is the one that I mentioned in the actual deck profile proper, being Fabled Raven. If you wanted to go a more synchro route, there are some pretty solid, like, I think they're fiend-specific synchro monsters that are not terrible, like Dark Highlander, which is decent. There's a handful of other just, like, dark-specific synchro monsters that are not bad. Crimson Blader is, of course, not dark specific, but that card is really good. Stardust Dragon will protect your board, which is pretty nice as well. There's a lot of use cases for Fabled Raven if you wanted to go the synchro route, and being able to be a normal summon that discards multiple Dark Worlds from your hand in one effect is pretty nice. Speaking of multiple discards from your hand in one effect, I'm still not convinced by card destruction, if I'm going to be super honest. I don't know if we really need this card. It can come up, but it's only really good when it's in your opening hand, and finding it past that doesn't feel great. I feel like I would just rather have it be like anything else. So me personally, I might just cut it and just call it at that. Could in theory cut these infuse as well. Maybe go up a copy of like Silva just to have another Dark World name, because I feel like one of the issues that I'm having with this deck is just not having enough Dark World names. So I could honestly see, like, even if we don't put Torrentials in here, just cutting the instant fusions and going up like either a copy of Gold or adding a copy of Silva and then going up another copy of Beige. I don't mind that at all. I think that's totally fine. But I'm having a lot of fun messing around with this deck. I think when this deck is not doing criminal stuff like the viruses, it is a really interesting loop. It is, someone in my testing group kind of referred to it as a stronger version of Machina Gadget in a certain sense. And to an extent, I do kind of agree. I think Grapha looping itself is not only more consistent and easier to access, well, not more consistent, because there are like, well, I guess they both have searchers. Regardless, Grapha represents a whole lot more than a Fortress does because we have access to the virus traps. These cards are unbelievable, but even just like how repeatable these monsters are is really interesting. And I think Grapha is the star of the show in that light, because whenever you have a Dark World normal summon in your hand, Grapha is just like a normal summon away from showing up. And this card is really obnoxious if your opponent does not DD Crow it out of your grave. If you let like too many Graphas hit the board at once, or too many Graphas get into rotation, things can spiral out of control incredibly fast. I'm also realizing I'm on the wrong side of the screen. One moment. There we go. But I think this deck is really neat. There's definitely some things that I still want to touch up about it. I think the extra deck is not as clean as it could be. I'm not really convinced by the Leviathan Dragon, although it's not terrible. Might want a Gem Knight Pearl just to have another means of beating over the Ophion, because that card is a problem. And while we do have a lot of answers for it, we don't have everything that I would want for it. So still a lot of work to be done. I do think this deck is really slick. I think there are for sure different ways you can go about building it. I think this Dark Arm Dragon could probably hit the curb and I would not miss it, but who knows? With that said, I'm going to thank you all so much for sticking around to the end of the video. This has been a very hectic deck profile. Maybe the most messy deck profile I've ever uploaded. And you know what? That's okay. Sometimes we can just have profiles like this and it's going to be all right. So I'm going to hop out of here, and I will see you all tomorrow for the next month of Meadowlands video. Bye-bye!